All right, a special Las Vegas Stride Club. I don't know what we're going to call this, an episode. It's a spotlight because Justin is a member of the Las Vegas Tri Club, but we are combining our forces because we have the evidence-based triathlete, Ted Gerard here. Hey, Ted, how's it going?
Doing good. Wednesday night, kind of special for us. This
All
is
right,
gonna be fun.
it is special. And we've got Bob Gamble, Las Vegas Tri Club co-host, Spotlight. Hey, Bob, how's it going?
It's going fine, thank you. I appreciate it.
I love it. And we now have a special member spotlight, pro-triathlete Justin Riele. Hey, Justin, how's it going?
Hey guys, happy to be
Yeah,
here. Well,
awesome. And I know you're in the Midwest, but this is going to be a lot of fun because you had your pro debut this past weekend. And fortunately, Bob and I also were able to race that race, and we couldn't drag Ted along to do it, but but it was really a lot of fun. It was a great race, and we're really going to be interested in hearing more about that race. But we have some other things we want to get to as well. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bob for the official introduction.
All right, thank you, John. And again, welcome, Justin. And in addition to being an EBT session and a member spotlight, this is going to be a celebration of your incredible accomplishment. And I realize that, well, for everybody who's listening, if you don't know it, Justin did his debut pro triathlon career at Indian Wells. And not only did he debut, it was his first one, but he finished sixth in a really stellar field of 25 professional triathletes. So he did just an outstanding job. And I'm not even going to do an introduction because there's nothing that I could do that would trump what Justin has to say. So I'm going to just ask Justin, let us know, tell us what got you to this point. You know, as far as from where you started, your journey has been incredible. And you started well, and then you're obviously, you're at the pinnacle right now. So get us going as far as how you got started and what got you to this point. And we're going to get into the race later.
yeah, thanks, Bob. Appreciate the kind introduction. Yeah, I guess my triathlon journey really started after college. I was 22 years old, working my first job in San Francisco. Put on a few pounds. I was in a fraternity at Vanderbilt. Did not do any sports in college. Basically just singing and drinking, and was in an a cappella group. Started my career in consulting, working really long hours, and figured I needed something to keep me focused and and just enjoy outside of my day-to-day work grind. So signed up for 70.3, trained for 2 months, figured I could do it, and totally underestimated how hard it would be. It wasn't that pretty. I did 6 hours, ran a 2-hour, 10-minute half marathon, which I think has to be a pretty close to a record for the slowest debut 70.3 for a professional triathlete. Like, I've got Lionel and Sam beat by like an hour and a half. Their first 70.3s were like 4:30. So proud of that because I have come a long way, I think. I was instantly hooked on the sport. And then 2017 and 18, trained pretty casually, 8 to 10 hours a week, like many members of Las Vegas Triathlon Club. Really enjoyed the sport, was totally just doing it for fun, but also had a ton of other interests in my life. I was mountain biking and golfing and skiing and partying with friends and doing trips and that were not at all triathlon related and all sorts of stuff. And, just started chipping away, got down to that 5-hour mark of 70.3 and really worked on my run. Got my run down from 210 to 150 to 145 to 142, just race after race. And I probably did 5 or 6 70.3s over the course of 2 years or 2 or 3 years between 2016 and 2018. Before I really had a breakout race. And that was 2018 St. George. I had trained really hard for 6 months, hadn't broken 5 hours, and went there and went 427, which was a good result in the amateur field. And I sort of thought, wow, I guess I could be chasing podiums and world championship slots in the amateur field. And that was just a few years ago. And then in 2019, won my first race, which was my first time. I basically went from 427 to 414 a year later, which was a huge result for me, and kind of thought, man, for the first time I could be like an elite amateur. That kind of became my goal. Like, maybe in 5 years I could get there to become really good and win these races and maybe podium at a world championship race. And then COVID happened, where basically in 2020 there was no racing, everything was kind of on pause, but I just kept training. I did a lot of fun stuff. I ran the rim to rim to rim and hiked the PCT for 17 days, and just still loved the process, loved the training. Didn't swim much. I think I swam 10 times in 2020. Like many people, I'm sure you can relate. The pools were closed in San Francisco and whatnot, but came back from 2020, and 2021 was a breakout year for me. I moved to Henderson. Trained really hard in the off season with my coach, Lauren Goss, who I'd been working with for about a year at that point. It was the second year of me taking the sport super seriously. I upped the volume, I upped the intensity, I didn't ski, I sacrificed the things that I was doing in my social life. I wouldn't say I went all in, but I was much more committed, and that consistency was showing in my day-to-day training. And so I won, two more 70.3s, went to Worlds and got second at St. George last fall. And then this year I went all in. I was like, okay, I think I can, my goal was still very much amateur only this year. I was never planning to race pro, but I thought I might have a shot at podium in Kona, might have a shot of winning at St. George. And I think with the right recipe, I set my goals every year before January 1st. And the last couple of years I've publicly posted them on Instagram. And this year it was win every amateur race, and I've done that. So I was super proud of that. And, just decided to basically rip the Band-Aid off and do my first pro race before 2023, because I was just nervous about it. I wanted to just get one under my belt before the quote unquote off season of the next 4 months of no racing, so that I would know where my weaknesses were in that type of race, where to focus. And yeah, for the first time, obviously my result on Sunday got a lot of attention, and people, I turned some heads, people noticed. I'm super proud of myself. It was a shock and surprise to me, but I've also done the work and stayed healthy, and it's not super surprising. Like my coach wasn't surprised. I think I'm just definitely doing a lot of reflecting the last couple of years and just thinking like, man, it's been a pretty cool to see the progress this year for sure. I'm not going to shy away from that. And now I'm optimistic I can actually get there to be competitive in the pro field next year. So that's my triathlon journey. I suppose I can go into so much detail, but that's kind of year over year. And I guess I'm as surprised as anyone to see where I am at now. And a huge part of that was moving to Henderson, right? I didn't have much of a social life. Vegas is like a training mecca. All my social life became revolved around training. And, it's been a more quiet suburban life with me and my wife in Henderson than it was like living in downtown San Francisco with 5 roommates, which is where I was coming from. So I've just been able to really focus on that and make it a big priority of my life. It's been awesome.
Justin, this is so awesome to hear your journey. And my question is I don't know, it's a little strange, but what was like the thing that was the switch, right? Like there had to be something that was just like, you know what, I need to make this change, or I want to make this change. Was there just one thing, or was it multiple things? And I mean the switch from being a good triathlete to wanting to be a great triathlete.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question. I can't recall. There's been a lot of small switches, I would say, right? And sometimes that's being fueled by a result. More often than not, it's setting a goal and chasing it for me. But the truth is, Ted, there wasn't one switch. It's been a journey where I'm pretty committed to triathlete for 5 years now, basically. And even in my first year, the volume was low and I wasn't as talented, but I trained a lot, every day, basically. It was just like an hour on the trainer or a 90-minute weekend ride. Now it's 2 hours on the trainer and a 6-hour weekend ride. So the consistency and the enjoyment of just making exercise part of my day-to-day routine, whether that's going out on a gravel bike ride, hitting a track, doing a trail run, swimming in a pool. Like that's one thing I love about triathlon is I treat it like 7 to 8 different sports in my training. I have four different types of bikes that I enjoy, all of them, right? Gravel, mountain, road, or TT, depending on the day. Am I on a group ride or a solo ride? So for me, the switch was always about just testing my limits or seeing how far I could push this thing, just out of sheer curiosity and willingness to know how good I could get. I'm in a unique situation where I was never a great athlete. I mean, I was good, but I played high school water polo. I played high school baseball. I was the 4th best pitcher on varsity. I was the first guy off the bench on my really, really good water polo team where everyone played in college. And then I always wanted to play D1 baseball. Wanted to play in the Ivy League, didn't get recruited by any of the schools I wanted to go to. and got basically just was never good enough at water polo. So I never I was always a good athlete. It was always a big part of my life. I was a pretty good skier, pretty good golfer. I was always just good at a lot of different sports, but I was never great. A lot of these guys I'm racing were D1 runners, sometimes world tour cyclists in this pro field, or they were Olympic trial swimmers. I have teammates that were really good. So for me, being in trial, it was whoa, I could be good at this thing. And that was a little bit of a switch. Was winning was, I don't want to say addicting, but it was new and it was exciting. And I was like, wow, this is a pretty cool feeling. So some of it was starting to taste the success, and winning is all relative. My first win was winning my age group at a local race with 150 people. And that felt great. Anyone who's listening to this, that's won an event, even, whatever age group you might be, 50 to 54 age group, in getting third place in a local race when there's 4 people in it, feels pretty good. It's awesome. So some of that was just, enjoying that process. And then I think, finding training partners that were more talented than me, and working harder. There's the old saying that you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And that, I take that to heart, whether it's work or my social life or just belief systems. And a lot of that's true in training. If you're surrounding yourself with dedicated, motivated people that are training day in and day out, those habits and approach to the sport will rub off on you. And so I don't think I'm answering your question too directly, Ted, but I think the switch was when I made EMJ, would be one turning point where I sort of saw the level that the truly elite amateurs were at. And I was just getting my butt kicked, that first year. And really motivated me to work harder, hire a coach, take the sport seriously. I learned a ton. And then the second switch would have been winning Oceanside this year, showed that the work I did in the off season paid off. And I, for the first time, put my result up against the pro field in that race. And I would have been 15th or 16th, which was right in the middle. And I was like, if I just get a little better, I can compete in the pro field. And that was the first time where I ever thought that or really believed that I could do it. And then Indian Wells, frankly, I'm so fired up. It's off season. I'm drinking beer and just drink a milkshake, but, I'm all in. January 1st. I'm going to see how far I can take this thing. And for the first time, I've actually felt now I'm thinking about, man, I started this sport 5 years ago, and a lot of the guys that are beating me are 5 years older than me. Lionel's 6 years older than me. And so now I'm treating it a little more holistically, thinking about my 5-year plan in the sport and what does that look like, and how do I get to actually be a world-class triathlete? And is that something I want to pursue? Because it's obviously a massive sacrifice in, prime years of your life. And it's is it what I want to be doing? So that's kind of where my head's at now.
Well, honestly, you did answer it, and it was a very good answer. And I think many triathletes are in a similar boat, right? It's that first little bit of success, especially if they hadn't had success in athletics before. And I think that your story resonates with many people. So thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, and success is all relative. Success can be just finishing something that you set your mind out to finish. And the other thing is, it became a staple of my day-to-day life. It became one of the most important parts of my day, the training aspect. You can't be a good triathlete if you don't love training, because it's 99% of the sport. I mean, sure, you can be the guy, weekend warrior, signs up for races and comes underprepared, but it's not fun. And you won't have the same fulfillment as if you worked hard for it. And so that's a little bit of, my attitude towards achieving the success, to your point, Ted, and feeling that motivation. A lot of it just comes from setting a goal, working hard towards it, and achieving it.
Yeah. It's a lot of you get to train rather than you have to. I really hate it when an athlete says to me, oh, I have to do this tomorrow. You get to.
Yeah.
Oh, I have to do a 4-hour bike ride. I have to do an FTP test. You don't have to do anything. No one's got a gun to your head. This is not a communist country where we're saying, hey, you're 20 years old and you're going to be on our Olympic team and you have to do this. This is your choice. You get to. And I think you embody that, in what you said. And so once again, thank you.
Yeah, that's a real good point, Ted, especially saying that you get to do these things and, you're having fun. that reminds me of one of the comments that Justin had made in our first interview with him. He said, and make sure I got this right, Justin. If you're not having fun, you're going too hard. That was at the beginning of your, your training and the beginning of your career. And that leads me into a question. You had a like a philosophy where you said you wanted to do, or you did, frequent, short, slow runs, and
Yeah.
that was actually the foundation of your 80% of your workout, is the way you said it. So my one question that I have for you, has that changed now that you are going? I mean, you're excuse me, but you're like stupid fast in all three sports: swim, bike, and run. You're I mean, 1 minute per 100 yards in the swim I mean, that's crazy. And putting out 380 watts for, as long as you did. But so I'm wondering, talk to me about how you changed gears in your training, not in the racing, but in the training.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a very long answer, and so I'll try to break it up into 3 chunks, because that's really how I think about my journey in the sport. I've had 3 phases of training. The first was there we go. I think you accidentally muted everybody, John, but I just unmuted myself, so we're good. So I've really had three journeys in the sport and training. The first was my first and second year in the sport, so we'll call it 2017 and 18. I was working with Purple Patch Fitness, Matt Dixon's program, on the squad program. Cheap program, $100 a month. You get a template, and you knock out the workouts. And that was just a lot of just doing something every day, I think, is one of the most important foundational elements of training when you're getting into the sport. Limiting off days, not taking strings of 4 days off every month or anything like that. Just being super consistent, building into your lifestyle. The second phase was, and I'll caveat, a lot of that was training too hard, chasing Strava segments, like doing all the like rookie things that you really shouldn't be doing in a highly structured program, but frankly, they keep it fun. So for new triathletes that are early in the sport, there's a balance between doing all easy zone 2 aerobic work that's going to build this great engine long-term for you, but also just enjoying the training. Like a good group ride here and there is healthy for the sport and keeping the fire lit to then get you, sit on the trainer at 70% of your FTP for 2 hours. So it was a balance. Enjoyed it. Always raced as much as I could, local Olympics, 10Ks, 5Ks and whatnot. And then, just tried to run 20 miles a week, basically every week, with, as you said, Bob, most of it being really easy. And that's how I really cracked the code from like the 2-hour half marathon to the 1:35 off the bike, I would say, that first phase. And that took about 2 years of consistent, maybe even 2.5, consistent running every week. No off season where I didn't run for 2 months or anything like that. It was very consistent. Then there's the second phase where I hired a coach, Lauren Goss, and I started taking the sport very seriously. Custom one-to-one planning, talk on the phone, every couple weeks, and a lot of basically the fundamental training approach was like 2 to 3 swims a week from 3,000 to 4,000 yards. I would say 3 to 4 rides per week, 2 outside, 2 on the trainer, something like that, with long, easy outdoor rides primarily. Think 5 hours, in the Marin Hills on a road bike or something like that. And then the weekday I'd, do some type of bike session, whether it be a 5 by 5 minutes above FTP to work VO2 max, or low cadence, 50 to 60 RPM, say 6 by 6 minutes with 3 minutes recovery at 70% of FTP. So I do just consistent strength work, consistent long rides, consistent 3 swims a week. And then my running, I would typically do, if I could stay healthy, I was kind of just battled walking on the edge with the running volume, but I got up to like, let's say 25 miles a week, maybe 30 on a big week, with 1 track session, 1 easy Sunday long trail run after a 4,000 yard swim. and then 2 or 3 easy 3 to 6 mile runs during the week. That was my training for like quite a long time while I was working at a startup, progressing in my career from 2018 to 2020. And, you know, 12 to 13 hours a week, I would say on average, maybe with a couple bigger weeks. Like I did Kona in 2019, and I had still never run more than 13 miles going into that marathon of Kona in my life, but I had trained maybe a couple big 15-hour weeks. And then the other thing I love to do is like plan big, long extension weekends. I think I shared this in the last one, but 3-day weekend where you ride 100 miles a day, or, you know, a big 4-day block where you go to Tahoe and you train 3 or 4 hours a day, every day in the altitude with friends. So we kind of just did these little mini camps, I'll call them. And those were huge, great fitness boosts for me. Then there's this phase 3, which just started after Kona. And so after Kona, my coach, Lauren Goss, who's an elite runner, hired a Norwegian coach who is the old coach of Gustav and Christian and is the head of the Norwegian Triathlon Federation. And she has learned so much from him and started using lactate monitoring to incorporate basically a very high amount of threshold training. And threshold, you know, basically means, you know, it's defined a million different ways, as y'all will know, but the way we're now defining it is the true value at which lactate production is essentially the same rate as lactate clearance, or even a little bit slower. So you're clearing lactate at a faster rate than you're producing it. Once you pass threshold, you're clearing it slower than you're producing it, aka the point of no return, aka you're gonna have to eventually slow down or you will fail the workout. And so what we've been doing is we've been measuring and taking lactate, which is, you know, you use a little meter, about $400, not cheap. You get a little lancet, poke a hole, get some blood out of your finger, take a little blood drop right after an interval, whether it's running or biking or even swimming. I've done a swim test, and it gives you the concentration of your blood lactate levels at that exact intensity. And so when you do that enough times, you can map it exactly to the heart rate and the power or pace of that intensity. And our focus has been to essentially dial in these exact mile paces and power outputs at the point where we know it is still aerobic, not anaerobic, with the philosophy that you can train as hard and as often, you can train that as often as you want and still stay aerobic. And you are also building an immense amount of strength at that intensity, which I am now ready for with the years of volume that I've accumulated and having a really massive VO2 max. After doing some testing with John and Ted, we realized I really don't need anything above threshold. I don't need any high end. I have that. And I proved to myself in the pro race that I had it. What I needed was more strength. So not fading on the back half of the run, not fading on the back half of the bike. And ultimately you build strength by more volume and harder efforts. So to answer your question directly, Bob, in a very roundabout way, I'm no longer doing, I still do lots of easy work, but it's all in addition now to lots more intensity and a much higher amount of total work. The Norwegians talk about measuring kilojoules of output per week and mapping that to their calorie intake.
Wow.
And so I'm not quite there, but we are very much looking at like each week is about 20 hours a week now. And it's a hard 20 hours. It's like it's basically 5 swims with an average of 4,000 yards per swim. And then within those 4,000 yard swims, I'm doing about 3,000 yards of that at exact threshold, which is 108 to 110 pace for me. And then within the running volume, I'm doing 40 miles a week now with 2 sessions of hard running. So about 16 of the 40 miles are either at 550 pace, exactly 548 to 550 pace, or exactly 648 pace. That's my LT2 and my LT1. So we're just working those 2 exact values at these inflection points for lactate. And then riding, I'm doing, you know, my biggest workout 2 weeks before was truly Norwegian in style. It was 4 by 30 minutes at 305 watts with 5 minutes recovery between each rep. It was basically a full 70.3 race simulation within a 4-hour ride. And I was so smoked, but I was able to recover fast enough and be back in the pool the next morning for 5,000 yards and then do my track session 4x4K on Tuesday morning. So it's basically hard threshold training every single day. And that was my best race build I'd ever done. I spent 0 minutes above threshold for a full month, but went into Indian Wells so sharp and so ready to feel what that race was going to feel like. And then I know we haven't talked about the race yet, but I basically completely overbiked way above plan. And then was still able to hold on with pure strength, on the run with zero pop in my legs. Like I felt horrible from the first mile and was like, I'm going to blow up. And I just never did. I basically never had, I never had 550 in my legs, but I went out at 6 flat and then never faded and probably could have done 5 more miles at 6 flat. I just had no other gear. So it was really interesting. It's been an interesting training approach. I don't recommend it for very many people. I think you need a massive base and you have to like be very careful with sleep and recovery and diet. So I'm kind of trying to follow this Norwegian plan, but it's not for everybody. And I'm the only athlete that my coach has on it now, for what it's worth.
And it sounds like it's the most technical, it's like,
Yeah.
we just don't have the technology to do that as far as the lactate training and as far as your, how to actually monitor that. Did you, just a real quick follow-up, and I don't know how much you want to get into weeds and then we'll move on, but just curious, how did you find out how the lactate testing, the numbers you got from that corresponded to your VO2 max numbers that you got, from based on carbon dioxide and oxygen consumption? Just curious how that matched.
It's an interesting question. There's I don't know, Ted and John can speak to this probably in a more eloquent way, but maybe I'll dumb it down for the listeners who maybe want it at my level.
Oh, me.
Yeah, it's like the way I think about it is VO2 max equals the size of your engine. This is how I've been taught. So it's like the horsepower in the, Mustang you buy or whatever it is. So it's the potential of the car to go really fast. But your lactate system, aka like the way that you utilize and recover from energy, operates, there's a metric called VLA max, which is the rate of lactate creation and clearance, essentially. And so that rate at which lactate is being combusted is correlated to your ability to sprint really well if it's really high, or last a really long time in an endurance exercise if it's really low. That's my naive understanding of VLA max. For an endurance Ironman athlete, you want it really low. You want that rate of lactate creation to be really low. And it's really hard to have both. Like Wout van Aert, one of the Tour de France's best sprinters and endurance athletes, can somehow miraculously do both. But most of the time, if you're a really good 400-meter runner or 100-meter runner, you're not going to be a marathoner. And if you're a marathoner, you're not going to have that top end. And so every athlete lies somewhere on this spectrum of low to high VLA max, and it's also very directly related to whether or not they're anaerobically dominant or aerobically dominant. And that can inform what type of stimulus and training you actually need. So which direction you want to move that value. And so for me, to your question, Bob, about mapping the lactate values to the VO2 max, I think it's less about the lactate values. Everybody is on a curve. So when you're going easy, your lactate's going to be low. When you're going really hard, your lactate's going to be really high. And the nuance becomes interesting when you are looking at the specific wattage and pace values of when your lactate becomes high, because quite often you'll see amateurs, they think their FTP is 300 watts, but the rate, the true threshold at which their lactate combustion is slower than their lactate clearance, or maybe those are the same thing. The lactate creation is slower than the clearance, is when they, might be 250 watts. And so they're doing all this training at FTP, but it's actually way above their lactate threshold. And so that's what's been interesting for me is like, I thought my FTP was 340, and maybe it is on the 20-minute power tests that all these amateur run, everyone looks at, but it turns out my trainer in that environment with a fan on when it's 72 degrees and I'm sweating on myself, there's so many inputs, and the lactate has allowed me to dial that into exactly 305 watts. But my pedals read 15 watts higher, and then I'm getting a cooling effect in Indian Wells, so I'm able to ride 317. But I know that lactate is also at exactly 158 heart rate. So I can kind of figure out my limits, Bob, with a really fine grain of precision to know if I'm overcoaching myself or not, based on it's not just based on lactate. And I don't really recommend lactate to anyone for training, frankly, because it's just a third thing that you add to the puzzle to give you a slightly clearer, better picture. But power and heart rate can get you 95% of the way there. And I got to where I was a month ago without ever using a lactate meter in my life, right?
Right.
Like I
And that
did
answered my question.
a month ago. It's like, no, nobody should be doing this really unless you really know what you're doing and you've already exhausted all the other things. Like the same point at which you're thinking about buying ceramic speed oversized pulley wheels for $600 to save 1 watt should be, the same time you're thinking about lactate. And I've kind of had already maxed out, like, I'm looking for any tiny marginal gain I can get right now. Whether it's gear, training approach, trying to find more hours in the day to train, whatever it is.
I love this. I mean, Justin, not only do you subscribe to this, you enjoy the training part, but you enjoy the knowledge that is out there, and you really have soaked up a lot of that information. I love just hearing this consistent year-long process of training, and very smart. But I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about your pro debut. That is such a neat thing. We always whenever we have a guest on, we like to ask about their first race, and we did that. When you were our spotlight guest. But now I want to talk about your pro debut. Tell us, and I know you did a fantastic video race report. That was really good to watch, and thank you for doing that because it really gave a good sense of what it was like to be in a race like that. But I want to hear a little bit more about approaching the race, being on the start line, and you're there with other pros that we all know, Lionel Sanders, Sam Long. I mean, these folks, now you're right next to them. Tell us what was going through your mind.
Yeah. I mean, it was a shot of adrenaline, to be honest. I've been a tri nerd for the last 3 out of 5 years, watching every one of Lionel's videos since 2019, following all of Sam Long stuff, following every pro race on the tracker. Like I'm a triathlon fanboy. I was just like anyone in the amateur field over the last 3 years, just like following the pro race, thinking how crazy it is that they can do all those times, and hearing the numbers like 330, 360 watts, and like not believing how anyone could ever ride that. Like that was like a year ago for me. I was doing 285, but when you're doing 285, 290 and you hear 330, 350, it's like crazy. That was like my 4-minute power back then. So I mean, it was awesome. It was crazy. I was just in Kona, cheering on the pro race, like watching. I don't know if Bart Arnault was there, but he was. Yeah, I think he was. He was second 1 year in Kona. Lionel was second 1 year in Kona. Sam Long has won, a ton of 70.3s. Have followed him, had never met him. And then Jackson Laundry, I watched him win Oceanside when I won the amateur race. He won the pro race, and like, I was like, wow, how did he ever do that? He beat Lionel Sanders and Rudy. So to see all 4 of those guys line up, and then I knew Matt McElroy. I just watched him on TV the weekend before at Abu Dhabi, at the grand final, where he ended up, I think he's ranked 10th in the world at the ITU Olympic distance. So I basically, and then Leon Poget. So I'd done, I basically looked all these guys up. Leon Poget is racing Paris Olympics in 2024. And I like introduced myself to him, and like, I was talking to him, like, huge fan, man, like, you're from Austria, and didn't realize he was only a 22-year-old little kid, but it's pretty funny. So I mean, I went to the pro race meeting the day before the race and was super nervous. I was just sitting there like looking around and scoping it out. And Eric Lagerstrom and Judson Metzler came in, who were there to cheer on their girlfriends, and they were both on the start list. So I was like, oh my God, it could have been the most crazy deep field if they had also raced, because they're both also top 100 world ranked pros. And so, I tried not to let it get me, because I knew I wasn't racing any of those guys, or at least in my mind, I wasn't racing any of those guys. I was like, those guys are on their worst day, they're still going to beat me on my best day. But I was like, I think if I crush my goals, I could get top 10. And then if everything goes right, maybe I could get 8th, which was the last paycheck slot. And then, it turns out like everything went right, and I had my best day, and some more stuff went right. Like Justin Metzler, Lagerstrom never started. Trevor Foley DNF'd. I think he just gave up after the swim because he was so far back, even though he can run a 109. And Leon Poget got an unintentional littering penalty at mile 56, which was a bummer. So that cost him 2 places. So like everything went everything went in my direction. And I had the best race of my life and landed in 6th. And so, yeah, I mean, lining up next to those guys, even in transition to seeing the cameras, and kind of gave Lionel a nod because we've trained together a couple times, but we didn't share any words before the race because he was locked in. And Yeah, I mean, it
I
was
love
awesome.
it.
I
I
was,
love
it was
it.
awesome. I just definitely felt like, wow, I can't believe I'm here. It was like it
Yeah.
was like a little kid in the shop going to Disneyland for the first time, honestly.
Well, I imagine the worst part, especially doing Indy Wells as your pro debut, is that you had to get in the water and wait for the start to go off. That's such a cold water start. Whereas an age group where you just roll in and go.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky. We actually got a warm up. So I've never had a
Yeah.
warm up in a swim
Oh,
like that. And the pros get a little special treatment. So we got to warm up. I got to get my face got numb in the warm up.
yeah.
So that shock was all over with. And then I got my heart rate up. But the pros had a tough swim. I mean, Lionel Sanders had a panic attack.
Yeah.
Flipped on his back and was sitting there for 2 minutes. And then another buddy of mine DNF'd from hypothermia, like 10 miles into the bike. He said he just never could warm up. And
Mhm.
I had zero issues with it. I actually didn't think it was that cold. I mean, I've swam in the Bay of San Francisco growing up and like Tahoe when it's cold, snow melt and stuff. And wore earplugs and double capped it with a thermal, but the swim was crazy. I mean, I shared in the race report, but it was just so hot from the start. Couldn't believe it. You know, you always hear the pro races is fast, but yeah, it was everybody, you know, every man for himself. And if you don't make it to that first turn buoy and you don't get in the draft, you're done. You're not in the front group.
Okay, I have a follow-up. Kind of, you talked about the swim being crazy. To me, the pro race, the bike is crazy. Like when you see them, you know, but I
Yeah.
always see them going like this, right? When I'm racing, when I'm watching them on TV. The speeds that you guys are riding, like 26 miles an hour, 27 miles an hour, average speed.
Yeah.
And you being in the group, right? Like you were, I mean, obviously I didn't see it on TV or anything, but you had to have been in a group, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I came out of the water and what happened was I fumbled my way through T1 like an amateur. And, you know, you have to be freaking fast. Like you have to literally rip your wetsuit off, put your helmet on and go. And that's it. You have two things to do. There's no third thing. And if you know, for me, I like didn't quite get the buckle right. And then I forget exactly what happened, but I basically ran out and then I tried to mount my bike, kind of fumbled with my shoes, wasn't in the right gear. Like every it just has to be perfect because these guys are flying mount and then they're immediately at 20 miles an hour. And for me, I was like fumbling and I lost the you know, the rubber band, as they say. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, they're 20 seconds ahead already. And that's, you know, that's enough to now have to burn a match for 5 minutes to catch them. And it actually ended up being 5 miles because they were going hard and I didn't fully commit from the gun. I should have just gone 400 watts for 5 minutes, settle. What I did is I was, you know, I was like, I'm going to ride 330, which is, you know, not 400 in my comfort zone, just out of it and see if I'm making up any time. And then what happened was I was like, I'm exactly the same distance away from them 3 miles in as I was before. So it's going to take more than 330, but I could get there. And then I just fully committed. So eventually I got into that group, Ted, but the learning was fix my T1. And if you're going to make the move, do it ASAP, or you're just burning matches for a longer amount of time. Because once you're in that group, it was about 290 watts as the fourth bike at the exact same speed. And there is a very real legal drafting benefit in that group. And then we sat there, the four of us, for, you know, another 10 miles until Sam Long and Jackson Laundrie rolled up behind us. And then they split that group up. Me and Leon were able to go with them. We dropped McElroy and the other guy who was with us. And then I was sitting in the fourth position behind the Sam Long train as he tried to drop us for about 5 minutes straight, where we were riding, you know, way crazy watts. Like, don't look at them. You don't even want to look. You're just hanging on for life, listening to the body. And that was a really cool experience because I was like, I might blow up. This might end really badly, but I'm having a great time. This is so fun. And I just couldn't let I guess a little bit of ego, but also just like, I'm here. I might as well go for it, you know, and I'm really glad I did.
You know, it's so interesting that you said that about the, you know, the going all in and learning that, you know, and learning that lesson, because you've done a ton of racing, right? But it hasn't been like that. Like age group racing is not, you know, yes, you might have one or two guys that can go at that pace, but in your races, but really you don't have groups like this that can go. The one thing I was thinking of is a lot of people that I know don't like to Zwift race. And you said you did some Zwifting. I assume you've done some Zwift races. It's the same thing, right? If you let that group go even for 10 seconds, you have to be all in,
Yeah.
right? It's gonna hurt and you've got to be all in, but it teaches you, like it teaches you that lesson. And it sounds to me like you've learned a couple of good lessons along the way. Was there any other, I'll just follow up with this one. Was there any other kind of takeaway lessons overall from the day?
You know, the big one was I got to work on my first 400 takeout speed in the swim. So, you know, Bob, you're saying 00 per 100 yards. Like, yeah, that's impressive. But the top ITU guys, if they're in that swim, they're busting out a 52 the first 100 into a 54 into a 58
Wow.
into and then they back off to that 108 110 pace. But the fear is at a race like Clash Miami, which I'm going to do in March. It's a slightly shorter distance than the half Ironman. There's a big prize purse. There's gonna be a ton of top ITU guys there. To make that front swim pack, I'm gonna need a higher high end, if that makes sense. So that was one of the takeaways, Ted, as far as it relates to like my specific weaknesses. The bike, I'm there. It's just more endurance, more strength, ride farther, ride longer, more time at 300 watts. Nothing special, I don't think, that I need to do, besides just get more experience and keep riding hard. And then the run, I think it's largely the same. It's like, I got to be able to run 114, 115 to be competitive and make the podium, and keep making money in the big races, if that's the direction I want to take things. But I'm right there because I overbiked and still ran a PR, and I know I didn't touch my ceiling of the run. So I think these races will just have a little bit of a trade-off. The big trade-off, Ted, is like the bike plus run combo is a toggle that you can pull. And I could have ridden 3 minutes easier pretty easily by riding 300 watts instead of 330 or 317 was my final. Would I have ran 3 minutes faster? Probably not. I probably would have ran a minute and a half faster, right? And if I had ridden 2 minutes faster, I probably would have ran 5 minutes slower, or worse, right? Walked. If I had tried to ride with Lionel and Bart Sam and Jackson at the very, very front of the race. Like that probably would have been really, really stupid. So it's finding that balance. And I think the fields in the pro races dictate what the bike looks like. And if I can ride in a field with Sam Long, Lionel, Bart, Jackson, and hold my own like I did, I'm confident I can ride in any field and then run my own run. So if I can get that run down to 115, 116, I think I can, have a good chance of consistently being in the top, whatever it is next year. I don't know. The fields are getting deeper, they're getting faster, they're getting more competitive, but I have some goals kind of up my sleeve for next year that I think are very lofty, but achievable.
But there's more races now too, right? So there's more opportunity. Fields are getting deeper, but there's also, it's getting spread out more as well. So
Exactly. Yeah. The PTO is pouring money into the US Open, the Canadian Open, the Collins Cup. These races have upwards of $1 million prize purses at times and pull the top 50 ranked global athletes to all of them, which frankly will open up more opportunity for guys that are ranked between 100 and 150, which is I think where I'll be globally, to have more opportunity to race in the regional Ironman races that won't be as stacked and won't be as full. And then of course the World Championship races will either be an amazing achievement for me to make a Finland slot qualification next year, which I think is possible with some luck and some hard work. But if that doesn't work out, then there's probably some other regional race I can go do and make a paycheck and, but I have a full-time job, which is also exciting. Like, I think I was the only one in the top 10 with a full-time job. So I'm kind of playing that up a little bit. I'm like, part-time pro here, like that can be my like branding if I ever go that route.
Hey there, Justin. I got one more quick question for you before we wrap it up. And I understand that you were in the bike ahead of Lionel and waiting for him to come by for a long time, and you held him off until the very end. The picture that I saw, he was in front of you coming out of his shoes. And what was it like when did he say anything to you when he passed you by? Because it's like you held off Lionel Sanders for the entire 56 miles. What did he say to you when he came by? What was that like?
It was cool. So there's this section of mile 40, there's a racetrack where you go around, and that's the first time I saw him because me and Leon were in third, riding third, fourth, going back and forth the whole time with a ref on us. And then, we hit the turnaround. I look at my watch as everyone does and see Lionel a minute later. So I'm like, okay, we've got 2 minutes on him. And then about 3 miles later, look at my clock again. We had like a minute and 50 seconds on him. I was like, oh, he's like barely putting time into us. Like that was like 10 seconds over 3 miles. So I knew we were riding really well when I saw that Lionel and Bart were they were approaching us, but not nearly as fast as I thought they would. And so when he came by, it was mile 55. We almost held him off until T2, which would have been really cool, but we didn't. Probably could have, but it wouldn't have gotten us
Gotcha.
anything other than a little more camera time and ego stroke. But he came by me in first, ahead of Bart, kind of looked over and said, you know, great work, man. And kind of just the nod of respect and approval that, you know, he knew I was a strong swimmer. I don't think he knew I was a strong biker. And that was just really cool. And then we got off the bike together. We were running side by side. And then literally, I don't know, I got to work on my transitions. I don't know how these guys do it. All of a sudden they were just gone. I was like fiddling with my hat and my sunglasses and grabbing my gels and putting my bib on. And by the time I got on the run, they were already, you know, probably 100 feet ahead of me with the cameras on them. And then they were just gone. And then it was honestly a solo lonely run the rest of the day. But I enjoyed it, just locked into my own pace and didn't see anyone else until Matt McElroy passed me at mile 10. And then I finished 6th.
Oh, that's fun. That's
But yeah,
gotta
it
be
was really
fun.
cool. Like I got a lot of respect from the other pros after the race. Like I had lunch with Sam Long and they were like, Jackson Laundry posted on Instagram, actually like on his own post that it was the best pro debut he'd ever seen. And like, it was really cool to see these guys respect the race I had.
Yeah, well, you deserved every bit of that too. So, yeah, that's what I figured was going to happen. In fact, you got a lot of attention from a lot of the pros there. You know,
Yeah.
hey, we said we were going to go 45 minutes, Justin, and we've already gone almost an hour. So
I've got one more question.
Go
that I
ahead.
want to get
Good.
to.
Yeah, I'm in no rush.
And I want to hear a little bit more about the finish line as a pro. At what point, you know, the way the run course is breaks out as you go up that last hill, and then you've got that sort of long run along the tennis garden, and coming into the finish line. At what point did you ever say, "Oh, this was my pro debut"? Here, what was the finish line like?
Yeah, I mean it's great. It's pretty underwhelming, you know, when you're 6th. The finish lines of my amateur only races where I won the whole race were like 2 of the highlights of my year, Ohio and Coeur d'Alene. Because they don't know, you know, nobody in the audience cares if you're a pro or an amateur. You just won the race. And so those were hype. Like Coeur d'Alene, the whole town thought I was a hero. I was like, and then you finish in Indian Wells and you're 6th. They're like, oh yeah, who's that guy? You know, it's very underwhelming. But in my head, it was one of the best finishes of my life. Honestly, it was up there with, you know, Kona or some amazing result I've had and I've been really proud of. I mean, I've honestly been really proud of basically every result this year, which is hard to say. I know those types of years don't always come every race, but basically every race I've been really proud. Haven't had a bad race this year. And so, yeah, to finish and just be like, what the heck just happened? I crushed my expectations and I made a paycheck and thought about that for the first time, which was kind of cool. Just the novelty of it. Not that it's a lot of money, but just the fact that it's like, that I've given $11,000 to Ironman over the last 5 years. Now I can start chipping away at it one by one. That'll be nice. So yeah, it was really cool, John.
That's great. I love it. Well, congratulations again.
And as proud as you are, we're proud of you because you're a Vegas guy. And
Of course, yeah.
we couldn't be happier for you. You know, you've embraced this community since you've moved here, and I think the community is going to embrace you back. You're a, you know, just a good representative of an awesome triathlete and an awesome person. So once again, congratulations. Well, hopefully we'll do this again with you know, some more pro wins coming up, or pro races coming up. And
Pro wins, yeah.
Hopefully a pro win coming up. But once again, thank you, and hope you have a good, very short off season. I know it's going to be really short because we interviewed your coach a couple weeks ago, and she's not a big believer in an off season, but I think you earned a little bit of time off. So hope you enjoy that, enjoy the holidays, and we look forward to following you in the new year.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Ted. Appreciate it. John and Bob, thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you. All right. Good night, everyone.
Yep, thanks for being here.